we have a more complicated relationship with emotions, because if an animal's scared, it runs away or it freezes, and that's it. For us, emotions can have deeper, widespread impact, and that is where a lot of the trouble comes from. Emotions can be primal, like in the way that animals are just aware of the fact that they're alive, they're awake, something is in front of them. That's what they know and understand. There may be some more depth than that, but certainly doesn't reach the amount that humans do. We have a sense of self, personalities, thinking about the future, the past. That kind of dynamic doesn't really exist with animals. So I wanted to share a technique that you can use when you feel like an emotion is too intense. The first thing to do is to stop restricting it to your body, meaning stop holding onto it as if it's restricted to the boundaries of your skin. Most of us don't think of emotions as existing outside the body, but this can provide some relief because it gives it more space, and that can feel like a reduction in pressure. Because if you just hold it like a ball of tension in one space, it may feel too much, like it's constrained, and that becomes the unbearable part. So instead, what you can do is just allow it to exist or to pulse or to be outside of the body. And that might just happen for a second, or it might continue to happen. So you might feel anger in your stomach or a tension in your chest. If you're afraid or anxious, then that can be allowed to explore spaces outside of your body. Now, this is more of a mindfulness body-based exercise, and that's deliberate because one of the first things we need to understand about feelings is that they are body-based primarily. We like to intellectualize them, we like to give them stories and why we are like that, why it's coming up, etc. But ultimately, it happens on such a basic primal level. They are just going to come straight into the body, and that's you're kind of making sense of it after the fact. That's at least the way I look at it for now. So rather than going to, oh, how am I going to get rid of this feeling? Or this isn't good, this is upsetting me and I don't want it and it makes me feel weak and I'm not in control, I need to moderate everything. All of these things are intellectualizing there. They're creating narratives around the feeling. And this is not helpful, generally speaking. Now, reflecting on it later is good. Creating strategies to cope with these feelings is good. But most of us will just judge ourselves for having negative feelings, and of course judge ourselves for acting on them. If you're going to feel guilty about something, it should be actions and not your feelings. So in this exercise, what you're looking to do is just allow it to be in the amount of space that it needs to be. Now, that might create a reduction in the intensity or density, and we'll go into this in another video, but there are other levels of interaction that you can have with feelings. So for example, you can feel that it has a texture, it's metallic and heavy and dense, or it's light, electric and fluttery. Those are very different sensations, but what it allows you to do is to create a language around the emotions, and that can really help you get in tune with what the body sensation is. And so that's the first step, really, is to become acquainted with your feelings, is to know what they feel like in the body. Now, that doesn't mean that they will always appear in the exact same way. They might, and you might recognize a tension in a certain part of the body as being familiar. You might say, oh, this reminds me of how I felt in this time of my life, and it's being triggered in this moment because of something that's happening on the outside. That's good. That's developing a longer term relationship with parts of yourself, which can include emotions. But it's also very good to just be curious. What is it like now? What is this version of this emotion giving me now? What is it communicating with me? So once you've given it that space, next is just sitting with it, just being present with that feeling. That's going to give you an ability to be present with the feeling without needing to change it. So the problem with needing to change something straight away is that it becomes a coercive attempt. So it's like, I will change you and then you'll be good enough. So you wouldn't do this to a person, and in a way you shouldn't do this with your feelings at first. That doesn't mean you let them run amok. That doesn't mean you let them guide the way you behave at all. But when they show up in your consciousness and your awareness, the first thing to do is to look for them. Just say, hey, I know you're here. I know this is here. And I'm just gonna have a look to see what is here, how many things are here, and then see how many different levels of communication you're having with this feeling. And then once you've seen roughly what's there, just be like, I'm here and this feeling is here. And we're just gonna be here with each other. Now, if you have the time and space to do this, this is how I'd recommend doing it. Of course, if you're talking to people, it might be difficult to do it to that level of intensity or focus, I should say. But whatever you can muster will help. So I think what happens when you act impulsively is you let it fly under the radar, meaning it comes in, gives you the body sensation, you react because this is how you know how to react when this thing comes knocking. And then that's a defensive thing. It's just a reactive, a learned thing, an association that you have with this feeling. And you've picked that up from somewhere. You've developed that habit. And this is just about slowing it down and not allowing the feeling and the reaction, so your behavior, to be so closely connected. Instead, you're just going to say, I'm going to experience one, create a relationship with the moment and with this feeling. And then you can decide later if you need to act. You might not need to act yet. We'll talk in more videos what it will mean to retrain yourself when you are impulsive, when you do react without consciously thinking. But for now, I'd really like you to become curious about what feelings are there and just see if you can sit with them and just be curious as to what they look like and feel like, and see if you can give them space outside the body. Okay, cool. Look after yourself.